Okay, well with these examples, I'm just going to read through the example just so everyone knows what each group's example was. Then, as I said, if I can just get one of you, don't have to come up or anything like that, but just in your chair, just one of you to just mention, why you came to the conclusion that you did. So, firstly, in terms of group one, I'll just read out the example. So, it's a workplace bullying example. Mary's been a room attendant cleaning hotel rooms for the last 2 years. Didier, the housekeeping supervisor, has noticed over the last 6 months that Mary's productivity has dropped in terms of the number of minutes she takes to clean each room, and in the last 3 months her productivity has dropped significantly. Didier has noticed that Mary is the slowest of all the room attendants when it comes to productivity. He's spoken to her on a number of occasions about needing to pick up the pace. Mary feels that she's going as quickly as possible and has a better quality of work than the other room attendants. Lately, Didier has been checking her work more than usual and her times per room, and telling her to keep going as fast as she can to keep up the pace for the day. Mary's told a co-worker she is stressed out at work and trying as hard as she can. She believes the times required per room are unrealistic and Didier is just bullying her. Could Mary have been subjected to workplace bullying from Didier? What led you to that conclusion? Okay, so group one, they've all left you, haven't they? Yeah. You're all part of group one. Sorry, you're all part of group. Okay, so I don't know. What were your thoughts there, guys? Anyone?
Yeah, we said we didn't feel it was bullying.
You didn't feel it was bullying, yes?
He probably could have tried to address and find out what's wrong. She's been there for 1.5 years and everything's been going all good.
Yes.
And then it's the last 6 months things are wrong, so maybe he could have tried to find out what's going on. But
yeah,
he's told her to go quicker. Maybe she could, rather than worrying about how nice the room is, she could just go quicker and do what he says.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So this is
average times or a set of standards for all that they must meet all the tenants and other tenants can meet it.
Yes. Yeah. So the thing with this one, it's an interesting one because I've also had this with other groups where some people said, oh yeah, we think it might be bullying. And it's interesting about people's perceptions. But I certainly think the example I'm trying to give you here is that it wouldn't be considered bullying. And the reason why is because what we're trying to say is that there are realistic time frames that are being set. It may be that that individual is not meeting it compared to the others, but we're trying to set some realistic goals. Now, if the deadlines were totally unrealistic, then that's another area that might delve into the bullying situation. But here what we're saying is, we're putting some deadlines which are the same as everyone else in terms of minutes per room, and we're just trying to work within that to manage it. So again, I don't think that's a bullying example. All right, group two. Michael's a first-year apprentice. Poor old kitchens, they always get a bad rap, don't they? Michael's a first-year apprentice in the kitchen of a busy hotel. The head chef, Tracy, consistently tells Michael, you've got it easy in comparison to what I had to go through as an apprentice. Whenever Michael makes a mistake in the kitchen, Tracy would yell at him and tell him he is effing useless. Tracy would often have team meetings and exclude him from the meetings, telling him to stay on working. Tracy told Michael that he was to speak only when spoken to by the other chefs. Michael was often the subject of jokes by the other kitchen staff, and Tracy would often make jokes about him as well, which he didn't appreciate. Could Michael have been subjected to workplace bullying, and what led you to that conclusion? Group two, what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, we did think that he could have been subjected to workplace bullying. Repeated behaviour, she's always telling him that he's effing useless.
Yes.
Making jokes and excluding him from conversations and meetings.
Yes, yeah. So again, you've picked up on those points that I was raising earlier, excluding, deliberately excluding, being the brunt of direct sorts of behaviours, not practical jokes, but being the brunt of jokes and those sorts of things, inappropriate language. But again, the theme is that it's a consistent process that they're going through. Now, the point I probably didn't make before, which I should have, is that if someone was yelling, if a manager, for example, was yelling and screaming at a particular employee, I'm not suggesting that that's appropriate behaviour. What I am saying is that it may not be bullying, but it may form inappropriate behaviour. That manager may need to be counselled about the way in which they've spoken to that individual. Doesn't mean necessarily, though, that it's workplace bullying. To me, it's just inappropriate behaviour. Now, if that manager was doing it consistently every day or every week, then it gets into this realms of, well, actually, I think you're actually starting to bully this individual. Okay, group three. Mario's a reservation supervisor. He's taken a large booking for a group of guests during one of the busiest periods of the year for the hotel. A couple of weeks after taking the booking, the front office manager and reservation supervisor were running through the bookings for the upcoming month in preparation for the front office manager's meeting. The front office manager noticed the hotel during one of the weeks in the month was overbooked and that the reservation supervisor had in fact booked a group of guests in despite the hotel being fully booked during that period. The front office manager said to the reservation supervisor in a loud tone, "How could you have made this error? You should have been more careful. Now you're going to have to ring the group back and apologise for the error. This makes the hotel look incompetent." Some of the other front office team in the open plan office could hear this, and Mario felt embarrassed. He thought that his manager's response was totally inappropriate, and he felt his error was a genuine mistake and that he had just been subjected to bullying by the front office manager. Group 3, what were your thoughts on that one?
No, I don't think it was bullying. It was just poor management of the situation. He might have just been angry that day or upset about something else as well. And he wasn't derogatory towards the group either. It was just telling him that he made a mistake. So he just shouldn't have said it as loud as what he did.
Yeah. Absolutely, I would agree with that as well. I mean, as I said before, that's probably an incident where it's not necessarily an appropriate way to manage the situation, but doesn't necessarily mean it constitutes workplace bullying.
It could fall either way though, couldn't it?
Yeah, you'd have to look at all the circumstances. That's the really difficult thing in all of these. You've got to look at all the now, if it had been that every week for the last, month that he'd been sort of really coming down hard on that individual and it was seen as being over the top or inappropriate, that's where you could border onto that area of workplace bullying, yeah.
But it's still, obviously, it doesn't consider bullying but incompetent or, bad management, to be honest, isn't it?
Sorry?
It would fall under, the management
Yes.
handled the situation incorrectly.
That's right, yeah. It's been poorly...
Everyone's open to, make an error now and
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Not robots.
That's right. So it's more of a poor management technique rather than bullying. Yeah. Discrimination. The hotel has recently introduced a formal training program to assist managerial staff in the development of their skills as a manager. Trevor, the maintenance manager, is 48 years of age and has asked the hotel manager if he can apply to be a part of this program. The hotel manager told Trevor that he wouldn't be putting his name forward for the program because it was designed for the younger, up-and-coming employees. And at his age, there wouldn't be any point in him doing the program. Group 4. Would you consider this to be discrimination against Trevor?
Yes, we thought he was discriminated.
Yeah.
On the grounds of his age.
Of his age, yeah, absolutely. A nice, probably easy example for you. Strangely enough, though, subtly, those sorts of things do go on, as we know, in the workplace. But I think with this one, ultimately, you'd have to look at it and say, well, he's 48 years of age. He might be working for the company for another 20 years. Particularly with the retirement age changing. So he may be working for a number of years. There is no reason why necessarily he should be treated differently to the other group of managers. So discrimination on the basis of his age, yeah. Okay, another example. Wendy's been working as a waitress for 3 years. She fell pregnant approximately 6 months ago and is now visibly pregnant. Visibly pregnant. You can tell I wrote that, it's a male's. The hotel manager, Steve, felt that it wasn't appropriate for the customers of the hotel to have a pregnant woman working in the restaurant serving them. Steve didn't want to tell her this though because he didn't want to be seen to be discriminating against her. Instead, he called Wendy in for a meeting and stated that he appreciated her efforts in the restaurant given her current state of pregnancy, but he was concerned for her health and the company's duty of care, and therefore from the following week he would be rostering her to do some kitchen and admin duties to make sure she didn't lose any hours or drop wages. Wendy was upset and told the hotel manager that she didn't want to change her duties and that she still felt fit enough to undertake her work in the restaurant. The hotel manager acknowledged her concerns but said it would be the best thing for her at the moment. Wendy asked Steve to reconsider his decision, but he refused and changed her duties for the following week. Group 5, what are your thoughts there?
We're a bit in between on this one because had he have called her back straight to admin, then he was concerned about her health.
Mm.
but because he put her on kitchen duties, then he was still running the risk of something happening. So we think yes, because she's pregnant and the parents.
So you felt sorry that she had been discriminated against? Yeah. On the what basis? On what grounds do you?
Because of her pregnancy.
Yeah.
And because of her appearance whilst
Yeah.
pregnant.
Okay. Yeah. You've added a new one there of appearance. That's a good one though, because there's probably two grounds. I agree with you there. I'd certainly say that it's discrimination on the basis of pregnancy. One of the things though that I would say is that if someone is pregnant, we often get this question, oh, well, they look like they're struggling. Well, they might look like they're struggling, but at the end of the day, if they go to a medical practitioner and the GP says, no, this person is fit to undertake the duties of their role, then there's no reason why they should have to move into another area of the hotel. Whether or not it might not look appropriate or whatever the case may be, if the employee is fit to undertake the duties of their job and they've been signed off by a medical practitioner, then there's no reason that they need to be treated any differently to any other employee. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And the last example, just a short one there. Sophie has recently come into work after a period of 4 weeks annual leave and informed the HR department that she has legally changed her name from John and now identifies as a female. Most of Sophie's colleagues have been supportive, however, her manager is uncomfortable with her gender identity. He tells Sophie that she can't use the ladies' toilets at work because it might make other staff feel uncomfortable. Group 6, what were your thoughts there?
We do think she's been discriminated against because at the end of the day, if the other staff members are comfortable with her going into the toilet, and she's going into the cubicle anyway, so we can see anything, we do think that the manager is, he's the one that's on the
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And what were your thoughts? What sort of grounds do you think she's been discriminated against?
Choice of gender.
Yeah, chosen gender. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting this happens very often, but certainly it does happen from time to time. So yeah, it is a
What happens if that was a customer and they'll just cross dresses on weekends, and customers complain that there was males in the female toilets? Where would you go from there?
Yeah, I'd probably ask them whether they are identifying themselves as being a male or a female in that scenario, because not knowing a lot about it, I'm thinking that some may still feel that they are a male but enjoy dressing in females' clothes, I believe, although I'm not. And therefore I would think that, and I could be wrong here, but I would think they would possibly use the male toilets, although I don't know whether they would or wouldn't. But I'd probably look at identifying, well, if they've used another toilet, do they identify themselves as being female or male, really? But it's an interesting scenario. But I think there's a bit of a difference between chosen gender and, as you say, the cross-dressing arrangement. Yeah, that's right. So a really tough one though. Yeah, I agree. Thank you guys for that. That's good. I just thought it was good to give you some examples of, where it's not always the easiest to decipher what might be discrimination, what might be bullying, and those sorts of areas. Okay. Moving into sort of the second part of what we're focusing on today is really managing work health and safety and diversity, and again touching on some of those areas for your assessments. One of the questions that I want to pose to you as well is, from a business point of view, what do you think are some things that a business needs to focus on? So a hotel in our example, what does a hotel need to focus on in order to try and manage work health and safety and diversity, to make sure they're complying with the legislation? What sort of things do you think they'd need to put in place?
We've got work health and safety officers.
Yeah, yeah.
Sort of,
So like health and safety reps, yes, yeah.
In every department of business.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, having people that focus on the area of health and safety. Yeah.
And policies and procedures already in place and
Yeah.
update.
Yeah. Absolutely. So policies and procedures, making sure you've got appropriate policies and procedures in the workplace, and we're going to focus on that area quite heavily. What else?
Training.
Training, yeah. So it's a big one. You know, we need to be training people on health and safety issues, giving them instructions on how to use a piece of equipment, for example, in the kitchen environment, going through an induction process, standard operating procedures, those sorts of things. Yeah. What else? Anything else? Does your manager do a walk around of the hotel, or do you do a bit of a walk around of the hotel? And sorry? Yeah, so doing some audits of the, physical observations of the hotel, identifying, what might be seen as a hazard, what may not be seen as a hazard. How do we try and fix things? So, people, you've obviously got maintenance people as well, they're involved in your hotel, so obviously they need to be fixing things, but making sure that we don't create a hazardous environment as well. So risks to health and safety. Okay, so these are really the areas that we're going to briefly touch on today. Consultation, where we'll talk a little bit about health and safety representatives and health and safety committees. Hazard identification and risk assessment. If we're going to talk about work health and safety, we can't talk about work health and safety without briefly going through this concept of identifying hazards and trying to manage risks associated with them. Information, instruction and training, and also procedures, policies and procedures, and I know that that's one of your assessment tasks as well. Auditing, which I believe is also something that you're going to need to do in terms of going back into your workplace, having a look at what hazards there might be in your workplace, and auditing your environment over the next few months as well as part of your task. And then we're just going to focus a bit on record keeping. What are the sort of records we need to keep from a work health and safety perspective, and what do we need to be doing with them? Consultation. If you go into the legislation, there are pages and pages about work health and safety committees, health and safety representatives as well. But ultimately, the point I wanted to make to you today is that one of the ways that we need to be able to consult within the workplace and identify hazards, deal with work health and safety issues, is that we have a mechanism in place by having a team meeting, for example. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, we don't have a formal committee as such, but we actually just meet on a regular basis, whether that's a monthly or quarterly basis. And there's no issues with doing that. There's no legal requirement that you have a work health and safety committee within your hotel, for example. There is, however, a requirement under the legislation to say that the business needs to consult about health and safety issues. So one of the best mechanisms you can use is a work health and safety group or team. And again, I've, from personal experience, worked in an environment where we've met on a monthly basis as a work team, and we've discussed health and safety issues. It might be that there's monthly meetings where you talk about a whole range of things, but health and safety is one of the agenda items that you go through. So it's an excellent way of trying to make sure you're consulting within the workplace. Health and safety representatives. Now, there is a difference between what we define as a health and safety representative and individuals that might just come and meet to discuss health and safety issues. Under the old legislation, health and safety representatives were actually registered with Safe Work SA. In terms of the new legislation, there is a requirement that if you're going to be a health and safety representative, you need to undertake health and safety rep training. And there might be up to 5 days worth of training, as it says there, in the first year, and then a number of days of training after that. It's again not a legal requirement under the legislation that you have a health and safety rep. However, if an individual within a work group, so for example, if someone in the kitchen said, I want to have a health and safety rep in our hotel, or I want to be a health and safety representative, it is a requirement then that the business, or as it's called in the legislation, the PCBU, must go through an election process. And I'm not going to run through the whole election process with you in terms of the regulations and the Act, but they essentially will need to go through a regulation process, an election process to elect a health and safety representative. So there is a difference between a health and safety rep and someone that might just meet to talk about health and safety issues and they're from a particular area of the hotel. Okay. Identifying hazards and risks. Throwing it out to you again, if I was going to ask you what do you think a hazard is, what sort of answer would you give me? What do you think a hazard is?
Something that's directly dangerous to you, like
yes.
immediate danger, sort of?
Yeah, something that is dangerous to you. Yeah? Yeah? Anyone else? Yeah? Okay.
Affects your safety, anything sort of like.
Yeah.
That's what he said, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that can affect your safety, yeah. Something that has the potential to harm the health and safety of either people or plant and equipment. So when we talk about hazards in the workplace, a hazard could be a hazardous task that you're performing. It might be hazardous to push a trolley around for the room attendant because it might cause strain on their back. We might be talking about substances, so like a chemical, for example, might be hazardous, or it could even be a piece of equipment. So using a slicer, for example, or some sort of mixer, it might be that is deemed to be a hazardous piece of equipment. So we need to try and manage those hazards. And we do that by assessing the risks. So if a hazard is something that has the potential to cause harm, what do you think a risk is? What do you think risks are?
How likely that is to happen.
Yeah, so the likelihood. So if we're going to identify the risks, what's the likelihood that risk is going to, that hazard's going to cause injury? Yeah. But what we also look at when we're talking about risks is not only the frequency or the likelihood of the injury occurring, but also the severity. And when you read through the resources on work health and safety, you'll see this terminology all the time about hazards and risks. So if something is undertaken and it's particularly hazardous, so if we're undertaking a hazardous task and the likelihood is quite high that person might get injured, and also the fact is that if they do get injured, the type of injury could be severe, then the risk associated with it is going to be very high. So putting it in a real life perspective, would driving a car be a hazard? Yeah, so driving a car could be a hazard because it's a potential to cause harm and health and safety. And when we look at the risks, well, we're driving every day, so the potential and frequency to have an injury, for example, from it could be quite severe, could be quite high. And if we look at the severity, well, we know that we could be injured quite severely from a car accident. So we try. Sorry, go on.
Classify most things as a hazard.
Yeah, yeah.
Coffee machine burning yourself, glass smashing it.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And that's where sometimes it can be hard to draw the line as to how many hazards are there in the workplace and what do you look at. And I certainly would recommend you go to focus on the key ones that you're doing from a day-to-day basis, and we're going to focus on some of those examples. So with cars, we have seat belts, we have airbags, we have road rules, we have, well, some of us, hopefully we all do, but we have other technology in cars to try and reduce the risks associated with that hazardous task. And the same applies within the work environment. So broadly, when we talk about hazard identification and risk assessment, it's all about identifying the hazard, assessing the risks, managing them, and then reviewing them. And again, that's that auditing process that we talked about. And we need to have consultation all the way along from a management perspective. When we talk about risks, there's a lot of literature about risk matrices or matrices throughout all the work health and safety legislation, and realistically you can come up with whatever risk matrix you like. But this is just an example for you of what a work health and safety practitioner might look at if they were conducting an audit of a business. So they'd need to look at the frequency of the hazard, going all the way from very likely to, very unlikely to very likely, and from negligible all the way to possible death or permanent injury. So if something is likely to occur and the severity from it is possibly death, then we consider it critical or extreme or extremely high. So if it's sitting in that category, it's obviously something that needs to be controlled straight away, and we need to put some control measures in place. So with that in mind, and we're going to do a group exercise together, and then we're going to have a break straight after that. So bearing that in mind, what I want you to have a look at, and again I've got a handout for you, is you'll get two particular handouts. One is, one is a hazard identification sheet, and it's going to talk about the department, the task, the hazard associated, and then the risk. And what I want you to do, and you'll also get a copy of this sheet as well, which is a risk assessment matrix definition. So how do we know if something's critical, high, medium, low, severity, what type of injuries we're talking about as well. What I want you to do is, staying in your same groups, I want you to have a bit of a brainstorm about 3 or 4 hazards that you think might exist in the hospitality industry. It doesn't have to just be a hotel, could be restaurant, cafe, etc. But in the hospitality sector, what are some hazards that you think exist? And then for that hazard, identify the risk rating. Is it low? Is it medium? Is it high? Is it critical? And then we'll reconvene together and just brainstorm some of those hazards, because I know one of your assessment tasks is to look at hazards in the workplace. And then after that, we'll have a break. All right, so again, we'll only make it a quick sort of 5 minutes or so, but if you can write down some examples, just brainstorm some examples of hazards.